exciting times to be able to stand here and speak on this legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And when I talk about legacy, I want to talk about the future. For too long, when we talk about Martin Luther King, we speak on his life and the work that he's done, deservedly so. What I think I want to talk about is the realization of his dream and how close we are to achieving it. And just a couple of days ago, our school, PS 261, came to the steps of Borough Hall. And in those steps, these young people were fighting for climate change, child care for all, and all these other issues that are plaguing our society. These kids have been introduced to selflessness, to giving to others, and not being self-interested. And that is just the first basic foundational principle of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Somebody that looked out for others, that stopped thinking about the individual and started thinking about the masses. How can we affect meaningful change? That's absolutely. How can we bring about meaningful change, racial justice and economic justice to black people, to all people? That was what he was fighting for. And I feel great and hopeful that our young people, this next generation, is going to get us closer to achieving that dream. So thank you all for being here. I can't tell you how grateful I am. In the words of the great Christopher Wallace, the notorious B.I.G., don't forget to spread love. It's the Brooklyn way. We'll be very proud to know that folks walking up on this stage are all from Brooklyn, all have powerful posts, because the great work that we've been doing with building political representation. So I get to introduce the majority leader, Chuck Schumer. Hey. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me thank our great borough president, Antonio Reynoso, for the wonderful job he does. I want to thank Mayor Linda Duncan and Moran Wallace. And you're in for a treat. Sherilyn Ifill is one of the greatest speakers as well as the greatest civil rights leaders I've ever met. And she's our guest speaker today. So it's great to be here. Now, as you know, today is a very special day. We honor the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man whose words and deeds accomplished nothing less than the elevation of the human race. No big coincidence, you never thought of this. MLK is the only day on our calendar, the only day dedicated to a single American. We have Mother's Day for all the mothers, and Father's Day for the fathers, and July 4th for our nation's founders, and Veterans Day for the veterans, but only one day for one man. And that's appropriate, because Dr. King was singular, exceptional, unique. When I was a young congressman in the early 80s, I worked hard to pass legislation making MLK a federal holiday. It was amazing how much bigotry came out of the mouth of other Congress members even as we fought to get that done, but we did, and now it's a national holiday. Because Dr. King hoisted a giant mirror on his broad shoulders, and with his brilliance, with his eloquence, with his faith, he forced America to look into that mirror. And when America did, it didn't like what it saw. And so we began on the long, slow, and continuing march towards equality. Dr. King made our nation a better place, just as he made each and every one of us a better person, and set us on a path to ending bigotry and racism in America, a path which we must still continue to march on today, of course. But even as we keep our eyes open to the obstacles that remain on the path to racial justice and equality, we should take stock of the hard-won progress we've made, and for the things which we are grateful. Personally, I'm thankful that the Democrats retained and expanded the Senate majority by electing the great Raphael Warnock, the Senate Republican of Dr. King's former church, Ebenezer Baptist Church. How appropriate desperately needed child care funding by 30%. And I'm particularly proud of provisions I included in the law to improve the health of young mothers, particularly of women of color, and help them raise healthy babies. It's a disgrace in America that we have such a high infant mortality rate among people of color. It's a national shame. And to try and combat that, we, for the first time, gave a full year of postpartum coverage for mothers on Medicaid. And of course, we got a lot more done in this legislative session. We reformed the Electoral Count Act, fixing the Electoral College. We passed the first gun safety bill in 30 years. We authorized the Violence Against Women Act. We passed the long overdue Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. We boosted veteran health care to deal with veterans who were exposed to the burn pits. And proudly, we confirmed nearly 100 highly qualified federal judges to lifetime appointments to the bench. Listen to this. Under my leadership, three-quarters of those new judges, powerful judges, are women. 2/3 are people of color. Making the bench finally look like America. Perhaps the greatest of all is to confirm Ketanji Brown Jackson, our first black woman and the first public defender to sit on the Supreme Court. This, my friends, is what happens when we never give up. When we fight to accomplish unapologetically, we fight for our values. But of course, it doesn't mean our work is done. Far from it. Unfortunately, we still see so much of the ignorance, bigotry, and racial hatred that Dr. King faced in his day. It's still there. But we should take example from Dr. King. He never gave up. He found his bottomless strength in Scripture. And during many dark moments, I know the powerful words of the prophet Amos rang in his ears. But let justice run down like water, and righteousness like a mighty stream. You cannot stop justice any more than you can stop a mighty stream from flowing. And it's with that righteous spirit in my mind and in my heart, I will continue to work to stamp out injustice and racism once and for all. Folks, if we can do that, maybe one day, we can finally succeed in making our society truly just and equal. And that day will mean that MLK Day will no longer be a day of solemnity and commemoration, but we'll be able to celebrate with parades and laughter and fireworks for the victory we finally achieved over inequality and racism in America. One day. Thank you for letting me join you in honor of the greatest Americans to ever grace our country. May Dr. King be a stirring example for all of us in the days ahead. God bless you all. God bless the memory of Dr. King, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. King, spirit prevail. Thank you.
Wow!
Warning!
Brooklyn in the house?
Yes! Yes!
We welcome you all to the borough of Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. But I have to say, we are on fire right now. We are doing some extraordinary things. And I am Lori Cumbo, New York City Commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs. Before that, I was your council member and majority leader right here in the 35th District, and before that, the founder of the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Arts. And I say that because I am the dream personified. Each and every person here is the dream personified. We take for granted that we are all sitting in this room together. We take for granted that we are able to come together in the Brooklyn Academy of Music with such command of such leadership and accomplishment and things that we are doing to push our country forward. But I do have to focus at this time on my great borough where I was born and raised. Some really extraordinary things are happening and coming out of this dynamic and incredible borough. You just saw our leader, our Democratic senatorial leader, right here, Chuck Schumer, in Brooklyn, New York, is now leading our party on the Senate level in Washington, D.C. But, right?
Yes! Yes!
We are doing so many things. Our borough president, Antonio Reynoso, first Dominican American elected to be borough president of Brooklyn, New York. We have our United States, New York State Attorney General, Letitia James. We have our public advocate, Jelani Williams. We have our first Puerto Rican district attorney in Eric Gonzalez, right here in this borough. We are doing things on a national level to bring justice, to bring humanity, to bring the equality that Dr. King fought so hard for. But we have something else special. We have our mayor, Eric Adams, who is the second African American to lead this incredible city. And we need to put our arms around him and to help him lead our city forward out of this pandemic into true equality. And it can only happen when we are on the same team. Like they said, when you are on a plane, you have to root for the pilot. And Eric Adams is our pilot right now. So we have to make sure that we succeed. But now if you think about the odds of something happening, we have in our Senate Chuck Schumer from Brooklyn. But we also have a dynamic and continuous rising star right here from Brooklyn, New York. A gentleman who has continued to lead our body, to continue to fight against oppression in the halls of Congress and right here in Brooklyn, New York. He had to break it down on the congressional floor to give the Republicans the ABCs. He had to break down the ABCs of what democracy is truly about. And he broke it down, didn't he? Yes, he did. He is putting Brooklyn on the map and bringing young voices and new ideas and fresh perspectives to this country. He is the American dream personified. Chicago had Barack, Brooklyn has Hakeem.
I've been part of this celebration when I represented this community in the New York State Assembly. I've been part of this celebration as I've represented this community over the last 5 terms as your member of the United States Congress. And it's an honor to now be part of this celebration, standing here before you as the highest ranking Democrat in the United States Congress. Understand, like all of us, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Giants like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Shirley Chisholm, John Lewis, Thurgood Marshall, and so many others. We stand on the shoulders of giants. Beneficiaries of the incredible legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights heroes and foot soldiers who he worked with to bring to life the American dream. This is a great country. We've come a long way in America. We know we still have a way to go. The founding document of this country, the Declaration of Independence, contained these words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally and endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Now these words, as the great Barbara Jordan once pointed out, were eloquent in their articulation, but incomplete in their application. It didn't necessarily apply to the African American community, to people of color, to women, to members of the LGBTQ community. Eloquent in their articulation, incomplete in their application. But that's when heroes and legends like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stepped in to help turn the situation around. To fight to bring to life principles like liberty and justice for all, equal protection under the law, free and fair elections. To step in and turn the situation around. And what's interesting, when you think about the life and the legacy, the moment of Dr. King, they did more with less. They didn't have internet, didn't have email, didn't have cell phones, didn't have Facebook, didn't have Instagram, didn't have Twitter, didn't even have TikTok. They did more with less because they had each other and they had faith. And as a result of Dr. King leaning in at a moment of peril to try to bring these principles to life, look at what they were able to accomplish. The 1964 Civil Rights Act to strike a death blow against Jim Crow. The 1965 Voting Rights Act that helped bring to life our democracy for all Americans. 1968 Fair Housing Act to open up housing and try to end discrimination in that all-important space. Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, all of the phenomenal accomplishments of the great society, Dr. King and the civil rights heroes were able to do more with less. And we're grateful for that, for the progress that they have made, for the moment that they brought us to, where we still obviously have work to be done. Work to be done. And as Leader Schumer indicated, down in Washington, we're going to continue to lean in, to continue our country's long and necessary and majestic march toward a more perfect union. Down in Washington, I look forward to being part of the next chapter of building upon the legacy and the leadership of Dr. King. We're going to fight for social justice, fight for economic justice, fight for racial justice, defend democracy, fight for freedom, protect the public interest, ensure economic opportunity in every single zip code, and do everything it takes to finally pass the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act so we can end the era of voter suppression in America once and for all. Dr. King, his faith and his work has helped to bring us this far, and now it is up to us to lean in, to believe in the goodness of the American people, and to believe in what Dr. King said to us, which is that the arc of the moral universe is long. Some good folks and some rough folks. The arc of the moral, that's the Hakeem Jeffries Brooklyn remix, y'all. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And together, we will continue America's march toward a more perfect union. God bless you. God bless you.
All round of applause, please, for Councilman Speaker. When we talk about advancement and the progress that we are making in this country, in this state, in this borough, it's not only racial advancements that we're making, or economic advancements that we're making. We're also talking about gender progress. And we now have the first woman governor in the history of the state of New York. And that is also part of this legacy set forth by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I would love for you to give us a big round of applause for your governor, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Chuck Schumer. You heard from, yes, he's got a big title now, but I know he's going to someday be known as the Speaker from Brooklyn, Hakeem Jeffries. Come on, Brooklyn. How do you keep doing this? It's extraordinary. Extraordinary. So, Borough President, thank you. And I know I saw Crystal Hudson back there, our council member. We've done a lot together. Walk the streets, met the people, let them know that they government that cares. One of the most incredible leaders, our district attorney, Eric Gonzalez, incredible. How he has fought to protect people, but also ensure that rights are protected as well. They can be achieved together. That is exactly what Dr. King expects of us. And Gina Duncan, thank you for this extraordinary masterpiece. Over 150 years of bringing joy and music and opportunities for young people, and just a chance to get a respite from the daily lives. You know, as I was preparing for these remarks, I watched Dr. King's speech this morning. I have a dream. And I thought about what would he say about where we are today? Has the dream been achieved? Or do most of our people wake up to a nightmare? And that is the question that is before us, and that will be part of our legacy when years from now, and they continue to celebrate this day in the life of a man who's extraordinary. How did the people of our time, 2023, do we take the torch that he handed off to us as a young man? He was 34 when he gave that speech. 39 when he was assassinated. What he did in his young life was put upon our shoulders the moral responsibility to do more for our brothers and sisters who are still struggling. Now that can happen, thank you, that can happen at the federal level, and we have great partners who are committed. It happens at the borough level, and our local leaders. But also, I take on the responsibility of Dr. King's message as the governor of the state of New York. And this is not new to me, to be inspired by his words and his life. In fact, yes, I'm this old, but I'm going to tell you the story. I read a book about his life while he was still walking among us. Did a book report on him. Little white girl in Hampton, New York. I went to the library. Childhoods of Famous Americans. And I pulled out the book on Dr. King, and I read it, and I reread it, and I reread it. This is a time we were seeing strife in our cities, and civil rights marches and protests. And my parents, raising us in a pretty conservative part of the state, brought us to those marches and made sure that they had the same values that they learned from their teachings of the church and Dr. King that were imparted to their children. So the night Dr. King was assassinated, we held our hands around the table and wept. Because I was raised in a social justice Catholic family, we knew what he meant to so many people. We also knew that his story could not die in that moment. And that is why we gather every single year to refresh the memory, to teach the young children of our responsibilities. I assure you that those of us in government know the responsibility that's been entrusted to us by the people to carry on his dream, his vision. And that means creating more affordable housing, because housing is a human right. More people deserve to have that right. Making sure that our children get a high-quality, world-class education, because it was an education that lifted my father and mother out of a trailer park and allowed them to live the American dream. I want that same dream for every child. We're also going to focus on jobs and skills training. Say, yes, there's still many more opportunities. But those who are just starting out, we will raise the minimum wage to tie it to inflation, because it's nobody's fault that the price of everything from formula and diapers and rent and gas, it all keeps going up. So we're going to take on those fights. And I'll do that emboldened, knowing that the people have given me this gift of leadership, but it's not one they'll ever take for granted. It's just like Dr. King. I feel that sense of responsibility to others. And I'll continue to heed his life story and his message as an inspiration to take on the fights and to make sure that we live his words and not judge people before we know them. That we treat others the way we want to be treated, with respect and dignity. Because all God's children deserve that. I'm honored to be your governor. I'm honored to be here today. And God bless every one of you. And let's continue the celebration to honor the man, the legacy, and the great story and inspiration of Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you, everyone.
Freedom.
Thank you to BAM's esteemed president, Gina Duncan, and to the incredible staff who work tirelessly to ensure that the Brooklyn Academy of Music remains a true gem in our city and a place where all are welcome. It's an honor to represent this district for so many reasons, and BAM is most certainly one of them. Dr. King's legacy is one marked by sustained struggle. Of course, it's also a legacy of great social progress and radical achievement. But Dr. King comes to mind most when we're in need of inspiration. When in our fight for liberation we're held setbacks and face defeats. When our confidence and resolve cracks and the path toward equity and justice seems stacked with insurmountable obstacles. That's when Dr. King usually comes to mind. He professed that the future we deserve is within reach, but it is earned and never given. And that's what we search for in remembering and celebrating his life and legacy. In 1956, Dr. King gave a sermon at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in Morningside Heights to commemorate the second anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education. In it, he spoke, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle." 67 years later, it wasn't enfranchising millions of Americans and outlawing de jure segregation, but rather the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization did the opposite, stripping millions of Americans of their previously constitutionally guaranteed right to abortion access. Instead of setting us down a path toward a stronger, more inclusive nation, Dobbs jeopardized the precedents set by countless landmark rulings, clouding our path forward, setting us back. But as Dr. King said, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And in no place is the need for continuous struggle more clear than in the fight for reproductive justice, where the struggle for racial equality, gender equity, and economic liberation converge to underscore the plight of Black women, Black LGBTQIA+ folks, and poor and working class people across the country in particular. Why might I take a moment to focus on abortion access in the context of today's celebration? In the context for our fight for democracy and voting rights? Because a mere 6 months ago, we saw the system rigged to go against the will of 80% of Americans and overturn access to abortion in the Dobbs case. Today, 18 states have some version of an abortion ban in place. 1/3 of people of reproductive age seeking an abortion cannot get access in their state and are forced to travel for the care they need. This is where our alleged democratic institutions leave us. Dobbs comes at a moment when Black mothers face a maternal mortality rate 3 times higher than that of their white counterparts nationally, and in this city, a rate 12 times higher. At a moment when maternal health outcomes across the board are cratering, when our for-profit medical system, mired in a long history of racism, leaves the poor and working class with an impossible choice: medicine or food, life or death. Dobbs comes at a moment when the rights of LGBTQIA+ people are threatened daily and our livelihoods endangered by state legislatures bent on perpetuating cycles of discrimination and trauma rather than offering solutions to improve the material conditions of LGBTQIA+ communities across the country. At a moment when queer and trans people face the double whammy of threats to gender-affirming care and abortion access. Dobbs comes at a moment when wealth and income disparities have reached such a point that social mobility has become virtually impossible. At a moment when abortion access has become a privilege afforded to some, but not all. At a moment when they banned abortion, but they are fine to open child welfare cases against us. They banned abortion, but they're okay if our kids go hungry. They banned abortion, but handcuff us when we can't pay school lunch fees. Be clear, pro-life means pro-cages for us. But as Dr. King said, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. The Dobbs decision left us with a choice: take a dive into hopelessness or find strength in one another and continue our fight. Paraphrasing one of the great abolitionists of our time, Mariame Kaba, we let this moment radicalize us rather than lead us to despair. We chose not to settle because building something better was the only path we saw as truly viable. And following the path of equity and justice
really is our only option when abortion bans are bans on vital healthcare services, when there are infringements on our personal freedoms, when they undermine our democratic ideals, the very ones for which Dr. King and our long line of predecessors gave their lives. We look back, continuously learning from Dr. King and celebrating a life beaming with an earnest belief in our capability to do more for one another, and a firm confidence in our choice and responsibility to loosen the chains of injustice. Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. Happy birthday, Dr. King. May we take from your legacy the courage to be bold, compassionate, and ever disruptive in our continued struggle for freedom. Thank you.
Reminded us that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Every day confronts us with stark reminders of the length of that moral arc. Hate crimes have surged as the voices of bigotry, emboldened by some of our most powerful leaders, have allowed that to take place, but also because of the silence of too many others.
Right.
Several states have passed laws that prevent our educators from teaching young people about our nation's true history, of slavery, of Jim Crow and segregation. We've seen assaults on voting rights, assaults on the rights of women, assaults on the LGBTQ community, and democracy itself in our state legislatures across the country, and in fact, in many of our courts. But fortunately, we've also seen many examples of bravery, of courage, of undying commitment, of so many people working tirelessly for a better America, for a fairer America, for a more equal and just nation. And we know that it's up to each of us in this room, in our work, in our personal lives, to be part of the progress. You know, New York City has always been at the vanguard of the civil rights movement. Years before the Montgomery bus boycott, the Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. launched the Harlem bus boycott of 1941. The Brooklyn chapter of the Congress for Racial Equity led successful campaigns to integrate our schools and challenge the discrimination in housing, employment, and education. Ken Thompson, our first Black district attorney, brought long overdue reforms to our criminal justice system to make it more fair and more just. And I can tell you that I'm so proud to continue that work, keeping Brooklyn safe, building community trust, bringing innovation to the criminal legal system, and making Brooklyn a model for what a fair and just prosecutor can accomplish. Now, we've taken a self-critical look at our work. We've partnered with organizations to look at racial and ethnic disparities in our justice system, and our work to promote justice and fairness is guided by data. But we use innovative and evidence-based programs to safely give second chances to our young offenders, so we can keep our families together, we can hold them accountable, we can give them the tools to live law-abiding lives, we can prevent recidivism to keep ourselves safe, and we can look at incarceration the way it was meant to be used, not as a first best option, but really as a last resort.
That's right.
At the same time, then, my highest priorities are safety, and we won't ever relent in trying to stop gun violence as we precisely focus in on the drivers of crime responsible for so much of the violence that plagues our communities, disproportionately violence that impacts Black and brown communities. I'm happy to report in the beginning of 2023 on Dr. King's Day that the strategy is working. Since violence surged in 2020 amid the upheaval of our pandemic, we've driven down shootings in this county by 32%. And we've reduced homicides in Brooklyn by 21%. That progress in saving lives is worth celebrating, even as I know we have a lot more to do to confront upticks in crimes in other categories. But as we work to keep Brooklyn safe, we're mindful that justice and fairness will always be our North Star, and that we must always be guided by our shared values as a community. Our values require us to remain steadfast in the face against racial hatred and bigotry. Our values obligate us to safeguard the rights of every person in the system, victims and survivors of crimes, and yes, even the accused. Our values motivate us to ensure the safety of our neighbors, to keep fighting for equality and fundamental fairness and equal opportunity and true justice for all. Because we are all stewards of Dr. King's grand dream, and our continued progress is on each and every one of us. May Dr. King's life and his legacy continue to inspire us all and keep us working to bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. Happy King's Day, and may God bless each and every one of you. Thank you very much.
Maryland School of Law in Baltimore, and pioneered a series of law clinics, including one of the earliest law clinics in the country focused on challenging legal barriers to the reentry of ex-offenders. Eiffel is also a prolific scholar. As if she wasn't doing enough, she's a prolific scholar who has published academic articles, op-eds, and commentaries. And her 2007 book, On the Courthouse Lawn, Confronting the Legacy of Lynching in the 21st Century, was highly acclaimed and credited with laying the foundation for contemporary conversations about lynching and reconciliation. At critical moments during national, political, and civil rights crises, Eiffel's voice and vision have powerfully influenced our national dialogue. Eiffel is a frequent public commentator on racial justice issues, known for her fact-based, richly contextualized analysis of complex racial issues. She is a trusted and valued advisor to civic and community leaders, national civil rights colleagues, and business leaders. At the same time of doing all that, in her tenure as president of LDF, she grew LDF to 5 times its staff, budget, and endowment. When we decided on the theme of defending democracy for this year's tribute, we could think of no person better than Sherilyn Ifill for our keynote address. Brooklyn, please join me in welcoming and warming the stage for Sherilyn Ifill.
Right? Because we care about a different set of things than our adversaries do. You probably said it yourself. I wish Leader Schumer were here, my dear friend. People like to rail on the Democrats all the time, right? How come they're so slow? You see the Republicans are all lockstep. They all stand together. Of course, they didn't 2 weeks ago, but they all stand together. People say that. But that's not what we're about, progressive people. We value dissent. We want transparency. We want every voice to be heard. We want representation. We want diversity. The very things that we value are just messier. They take longer. It's stickier. And if we don't understand that we're fighting for different things, we will denigrate ourselves for not doing it as fast as they do. We can't do it as fast as they do it because we're doing something different. Just contrast how we operate. We're marching peacefully for what we want. They're climbing the walls of the Capitol, attacking the police, punching representatives, and vice presidents, guns, bear spray, and knives. Before I leave here today, I'm going to ask you to call your representatives and your senators. That's what we do. They're breaking into Speaker Pelosi's office and putting their feet up on her desk. We are standing in line for 9 hours to vote, and they are targeting and menacing and threatening Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, people who are doing the service of counting the ballots in Atlanta. We're fighting for free community college and fair tuition, and they're threatening professors and banning books. We're fighting against police violence, and they are arming the police with weapons of war and shielding brutal police from accountability. We're fighting for dignity for all people, whatever their sexual or gender identity, and they are putting a target on the back of trans people. We are fighting for the health and safety of women and girls, and they are fighting to compel girls to bear children. We are speaking truth to power, and they are developing an entire language to avoid calling a thing a thing. An insurrection looks like a normal group of tourists. Voter suppression is election integrity. They call hate speech free speech. We are fighting for racial justice and equality, and they are fighting to maintain white supremacy.
That's right.
And white supremacy is attractive because it is the place where their cruelty, their sickness, their fear, and even their shame can comfortably hide. The battle in which we are waged is the battle of our lifetimes and our children. It is for the future of this country, and because of our country's outsized influence across the globe, it is even a battle for the future of the world. I know that there are some people, some politicians, who blame it all on the former guy. Trump brought us here. No. We've been in a state of democratic decline for decades. Trump was just shrewd enough to see the opportunity in our weakness. Think about it. Do we dream of a day we could go back to when we had a black president and a black attorney general? I love me some President Obama. Eric Holder, H.D. Holder, is a good friend, also son of Queens, by the way. But were those the golden days of our democracy? Have we forgotten that Trayvon Martin was killed and his killer walked away with impunity? Was it not then that we watched Eric Garner choked to death by police who were never held accountable? Or that we saw Mike Brown's body in the street and Ferguson erupt as young people demanded change? When we saw one of the greatest scholars in our nation, Dr. Henry Louis Gates, arrested on his front porch? It was in those days that the Supreme Court issued its devastating decision in the Shelby County versus Holder case, punching a hole in the Voting Rights Act, that statute for which John Lewis and so many others bled. It was that case that unleashed voter suppression in the South and then across the country. Back then, there were still over 1.5 million people held in our nation's prisons and jails in largely inhumane conditions. Schools were still segregated from Alabama to New York City. We were in a housing affordability crisis. And Mitch McConnell stole a Supreme Court seat from President Obama back then. So we're not trying to go back. I've been a civil rights lawyer for 30 years, fighting against voter suppression, injustice in our criminal legal system, racism in education and employment, so I am not nostalgic. In fact, many of the structures of our democracy that are breaking down are, if I am honest, the very structures that people like me have been fighting against for decades. So to those who only want to go back to when things were calmer and more polite, I am not with you. Because this moment is one of peril for this nation, but it is also one of opportunity. And if we are to take advantage of the opportunity, we will need power. We have a unique opportunity amid all this chaos. We have the chance to build the democracy we dreamed of. We could reimagine the public university. We should imagine how voting could be conducted to give the greatest access to those who are eligible and greatest protection from those who would hijack our election systems. Why shouldn't the Supreme Court be held to an ethics code like every other judge? challenge the Supreme Court confirmation process.
Yeah.
So what happened to Ketanji Brown Jackson before that committee, a woman of esteemed qualifications and decency, can never happen again. Now that COVID has opened up our thinking about the meaning of work in our lives and our effort to achieve greater balance and health, perhaps now we can better envision how jobs can be shared and what constitutes meaningful work, and why even the level that we've talked about, raising the minimum wage, is not good enough. Maybe now we can talk about how housing might become more affordable with arrangements that recognize that many of us are working at home as well as in an office. Perhaps now we can experiment even more aggressively with accelerated high schools for young people so that they can enter as adults with a degree in hand. What if we really did reimagine public safety? This time of democratic unraveling may ironically be our last best chance to make, at least in our generation, to make the kind of sweeping, transformative changes so many of us have said we want. Why? Because our minds are open like never before. Because we have seen where the fissures and weaknesses in our democratic infrastructure are, and we know that we need drastic change. Because authoritarianism, a global threat, by the way, threatens to doom us all. Because painful as it has been, everyone has seen the videos of police murdering unarmed Black people. Everyone has seen it in this country and around the world. Because the Me Too movement revealed what women in every industry in America and around the world have been dealing with in the workplace. Because we are feeling the effects of climate disaster right now. Because we have seen the utter irresponsibility and cruelty of those who purport to lead us. We saw children separated from their parents at the border. Because we lost precious time and hundreds of thousands of more people to COVID than needed to happen. Because on January 6th, hell, even white people and conservative people, whether they want to admit it or not, saw the dangerous element in this country that has been on destroying our very nation. But if we are to take advantage of this opportunity, we need power, and we cannot obtain power without being organized, without protecting and strengthening the institutions of our communities and retrofitting them to fight the battles we are facing. What do I mean by that? What are the institutions of our communities? Our churches, our HBCUs. I've talked to my own AME church. You know how the week before election, just if you remember this or recognize this, just let me know. You come into your church, AME, Baptist, whatever kind of church it is, and there's some strange people the week before election sitting on the front row. You've never seen them before, and you'll never see them again. You might see them in 4 years, right before election day. They're candidates for public office, and they come to your house of worship, and we're always very lovely. They say a few words, sometimes it's a laying on of hands and so forth, right? So the question I have is, why can't we say, yes, you may come on Sunday, but first, we need you to come on Tuesday night for a candidate forum so that you can give your platform. That's what I mean by retrofitting our institutions. In Baltimore, where I live most of the time, when I served on the board of the library, we had to retrofit the library. Food deserts, we created a program where you could come to the public library, you could order online and pick up your fresh produce. Retrofit our institutions for the battle. I admit from my own profession that we have to hunker down and find new legal strategies to meet the moment, and we can't do that without first fixing the obvious flaws in our legal system that allow the law to be used as a gateway for the very anti-democracy project we're facing. Perhaps now we have the opportunity for Fannie Lou Hamer. You say her name again. Fannie Lou Hamer. Carmichael and countless Black people and their allies were responsible for challenging and changing the direction of the most powerful country in the world. In fact, they to turn the very idea of power on its head. This is what black people in this country have done and continue to do. My dear friend in Alabama, Hank Sanders, civil rights lawyer and activist and former legislature, always says about the fight in Alabama. He always says they had all the police, and they had all the guns, and they had all the dogs, and they had all the laws, and we overcame them with what we had. Amen. Songs, our faith, our numbers, our truth, our determination. To that imagination and to our belief in what we can accomplish. Our mere demand to live as free people, our refusal to accept second-class citizenship, our insistence on respect for our dignity and our lives, push this country towards ever-new, evolving, and improving conceptions of democracy. Dr. King said this in 1961. Black people, okay, he said Negroes, but I'm going to say black people have illuminated imperfections in the democratic structure that were formerly only dimly perceived and have forced a concerned re-examination of the true meaning of American democracy. We did that. We do that. And it's time we walk in our rightful position as founding mothers and fathers of American democracy. And we call upon to do that in this moment. And so we need power. First, we have to have a clear sense of the power we already have. One of the tricks of those who stand against us is to confuse progressive people into believing that we don't have power. But they are actually scared of us. In fact, everything they do is a reaction to our show of power. Our power to vote, to run for office, to protest, to push our legislators and governors, to create collectives and mutual aid, and to model within our communities the way we want our government to engage with us. We have the power to use our dollars in support of what we believe. We have the power to hold our elected officials' feet to the fire, to show up at city council meetings and school board meetings. How many of you go to a school board meeting? City council meeting? Town hall of your senators? Okay. We have the power to strengthen our own institutions so that we need not come hat in hand to anyone when we make our demands. We have that power now. And if we're honest, as my little poll just showed, we have to admit we have not used that power to its fullest. So we have to begin first by using the power we have. But I also believe we have the opportunity within reach to marshal our power to change the very structures of the government that oppresses us. We can dismantle the filibuster. We will end cash bail, and if it isn't connected to a rise in crime, read the paper. We must end the prison system as we now know it. It is inhumane, dangerous, degrading, and unsustainable. There has to be another way. We will reimagine a system of public safety that prioritizes community over armed law enforcement. We will create an education system that develops our children to live and thrive in this world. We will create a justice system that is just. We will save our planet. It may be battered and it may have lost much of the beauty it once held, but just as surely as we saved our waterways with the Clean Water Act, y'all too young to remember what it used to be like, we will find a way to contribute meaningfully to the salvation of our planet. Most of all, we have the power to imagine a country that centers the humanity and dignity of everyone within its borders. We must not be afraid to have power and use power. We've perhaps been too reticent about the accumulation of power in the past. We've left power on the table. We have ignored elections for sheriff and judge and district attorney. We voted for candidates and then never attended a town hall. And when those candidates win elections, we've allowed them to take baby steps instead of demanding the transformative change we want. We have not encircled our libraries and made clear that these places will not be corrupted by censorship. We have not become court watchers. We have not spoken out or spoken up in our churches and advocated for an inclusive gospel. But we set the formula for how to build grassroots power and make change. They're just copying off of us, right? They're responding to everything we do, trying to create the same thing. They see our power. They saw what we were organizing on Twitter. That's why they decided to break it. They saw the outpouring of empathy and solidarity after young people and people all over the country and world saw the video of George Floyd being tortured. That's why they decided that their children can no longer learn about the history of race in this country. Because they understand that empathy is power too. Empathy allows us to link arms with our colleagues and fight this battle. So they see our power. When Georgia passed its voter suppression law in 2021, it was a direct response to the outpouring of black voters in 2020.
That's right.
That's why the law includes a provision that says you cannot give refreshments to people standing online. That is a direct response to the fact that black voters stood online for 9 hours in Fulton County, Georgia in the primary in 2020. They are responding to our power. And if we misdiagnose this thing, we will think that we are weak. In fact, we'll stop doing the things that were effective, that scared them. Because we'll say, see, it didn't work. So we got to diagnose this correctly. Power in and of itself is not dangerous or bad. Dr. King talked about the need for us to organize our strength into compelling power so that the government cannot elude our demands. Indeed, Dr. King reminded us that we need political strength, he said, more desperately than any other group in American society. And he called on us to become intense political activists.
Yes.
And you don't have to do it 24/7 as your day job like I do. But you do have to do it.
Yes.
You have enough time to call your representative or your senator once a month. You surely do. You can decide you're going to go to 2 school board meetings this year. Right?
Yeah.
You have. Of course, to gain more power, we'll need strong coalitions and that unwavering commitment to transformation. We will have to become comfortable with raising uncomfortable conversations, with casting uncomfortable votes for my elected leaders who are still here. We will have to march in uncomfortable places, and we will have to, in those places, be prepared to speak truth to power. And then, in the spirit of Dr. King, we must overlay our power with love. Because when you fight for power, you must dream of the day when you will wield power differently than those who oppress you. We will wield it with love. Now, when I say love, I don't mean all soft and weak and tears and no. There's strength in love. We must have power and we must have love. Dr. King said it clearly. Power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. As we seek power,
standing the intersections, the margins, have the clearest view of the page. Our vision is needed. There is power in our union, in our rainbow coalition, the loving and the resolute and the creative and the good traveling. We are more than seeds, we're the soil and the water, the good ancestors, if we choose to be. The beloved community every time we choose to be. Because as Dr. King taught us, as Sherilyn Eiffel teaches us, love, empathy, radical coalition and community building, growing, resisting, creative problem solving, these are our superpowers, not weaknesses. On our one human family. Our one human family may be dysfunctional and fighting, but family still. Our circle may be battered, it may be bloody and bruised, but it is still whole. None above, none below, unbroken, equal. All of us, every single one of us equal under this listening sky. Where our ancestors' dreams. And we have yet to dream of what is to come.